Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another show with Barry and me. Hope you've had a great week. How about you, Barry?
It's been an interesting one for sure, yes.
Really? Well,
Definitely
now
yes.
you've piqued my interest. We were going to talk about taking responsibility in relationships, but there's something you'd like to add to that?
Not well. I think the idea, because taking responsibility doesn't only happen in relationship, just to be clear, of course.
Absolutely, but we're a relationship show, so and
Yes.
again, it's not just romantic relationships. We're always relating to somebody in our lives, unless we're a complete hermit. We all, as we always say, it's the relationship with ourselves. So
Well,
those
that's where I play with it, because taking responsibility for our own efforts, our own results, our own whatever it is kind of functional about having a successful life as well. The thing I'll lean into, I don't want to go too far down my own personal road because it's a show about relationship, is just having some awarenesses of things where I'd let languish in my life. And so now taking responsibility for them means putting more energy into making those things happen, making those things work, and doing some activities that are going to produce results, because I wasn't taking responsibility for those parts of my life. You know, like fitness stuff. Just to be transparent, one of those is fitness. Is that I basically have been hiking every morning for 3 or 4 years now, but it needs to be up leveled. I've been getting late. It's funny to say I'm getting lazy about hiking. No, I'm still doing the hiking, but in terms of getting fit and getting healthy, like in terms of diet and the way I exercise, other things beyond that, I'm now taking more responsibility for. So that's a way of adding to it. That's one way. There's other things too, but that's one I can illustrate quickly without getting too far away from our topic.
Yeah, that's great. So I hear you're seeing it almost from a different perspective from me. It's like taking responsibility for one's life, for your
Yeah.
choices, for things that are within your control. And what actually sparked my thought
Mm.
on this subject was actually more about when we're in relationships with each other. And I'll be more transparent here.
Hmm.
I have a family business that there are, members of the family, or and there's things that are sort of, let me just put it this way. Um, when you have 7 people within an institution that they think might not be running as well as it could, and there can be a lot of finger pointing, and there can be a lot of blaming. And that, and this is what started my thoughts along this line, is that when we get stuck in that place of not taking any responsibility for having contributed to a situation, we can go around and around and around in circles of finger pointing and blaming,
Oh yeah.
and getting nowhere. Whereas my sort of philosophy is, if we really look hard enough to find where we dropped the ball,
Hmm.
all of us individually, at some point or another. When we are able to do that, we're able to own, yes, me too. I bear some responsibility here. It's a very empowering feeling. When you take responsibility for your part in something, it means that you can learn from it, move
Hmm.
on from it,
Right.
um, acknowledge it, so you're not in denial. It's, like I said, it's empowering. It's something you can learn from, and you can be proactive and move forward. And whether it's in a situation, there's just 2 of you in a relationship, or like I just mentioned, there were 7 people involved in this situation, it's the same thing. When we stop pointing fingers and blaming and take responsibility for ourselves and what we may have done, we can move forward.
So there's a caveat on this. I want to speak to this first because I'm taking kind of yours in a more neutral or centered or an anonymous sample. Is that when we're in a relationship with other people and we start to say, I'm going to take responsibility for my participation, what I didn't do, what I did do, how I can do things differently, all those things. It's great. The challenge, though, is when the other people in that relationship or that arrangement don't want to choose responsibility. They just want to stay blaming. And it can
Hmm.
feel challenging as the person who's taken responsibility not to feel like they're being pressured or being dumped on by the other people who didn't step up themselves. Because in a way, what you've done is, I'm stepping up. How about you? And they say, no, I'm going to stay in, the blame judgment game. And so the challenge in a relationship oftentimes is, well, one partner, I'm just thinking, I've got an example from my own history, but sometimes I've known experience with clients. One partner takes responsibility for their participation in a relationship and the other person doesn't. It can be very challenging. The key, though, is to recognize, as we talked right at the beginning about responsibility for ourselves, is when we do take responsibility, as you said, it's very empowering. It also requires sometimes harder choices because we can't stay where we were with that relationship as it was and still be functional.
Hmm.
So the choice becomes, go back to the old way or stay in the new way, whatever that is, whether it's leaving or changing a relationship or whatever that is. But in like your situation, say with family, you can't really leave the family. So it's how do you change the relationship so that you don't feel like you're going to be dragged back down into the old way of being?
Yeah. Well, this is the key, though. This is where it doesn't, I don't think it requires anybody else for you to take responsibility. Again, it's like that unconditional love we talked about last week.
Yeah,
It's not like, I'll take responsibility on the condition that you take responsibility too.
right.
I I can show up in a relationship and take responsibility and be so damn proud of myself that I really don't give a damn what the other person's doing.
Hmm.
I mean, okay, maybe in a romantic relationship it's more important, but in like this family situation, how everybody else behaves is number one, it's out of my control, and number two, I'm not going to let other people's behavior affect how I show up in life. I'm not going to say, well, I'm not taking responsibility because they're not taking responsibility. I will. I My actions are solely based on an audience of one, which is myself.
Hmm.
I'm the one that wants to stay in integrity for myself, not because I need the recognition from anybody else. I
Right.
want to stay proud of my actions and happy with myself because I had the maturity to say, this is where I was responsible. So it's a very sort of, it sounds selfish. It sounds like it's just all about me, but it's a way of satisfying myself without not being dependent on external approval or validation.
Well, that's the key is take responsibility without feeling like you're now out of balance with things around you by doing
Mm-hmm.
it totally for your own self support and self and away for your own freedom and happiness ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing. So that was the piece I guess I was talking about earlier about is realizing for myself I need to do that to be responsible for what I wanted to have happen so I can feel better about myself.
Yeah.
But in a relationship, and this is where we get I guess into a unconditional conditional like we talked about last week, is that sense of being responsible and then taking ownership of that place then makes it like this like balancing the scales, they're out of balance in a sense. And the thing is, can that be okay like that? Because that's what's really happening.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in a two-person relationship, that if you continue to mature, grow, um, um, like be reflective, see where you are responsible for certain things, and you continue to do that and to grow, there will come a time if your partner is not doing that, that you will just outgrow that relationship. That just
Yeah.
naturally happens. It's not like you start saying, well, I don't want to be with you because I take responsibility and you don't. You will just find that there is less of a connection between you. You've just
Yes.
outgrown each other, if that is the case. I'm going to reveal something very intimate here, but many, many years ago, I was in a relationship where I said to my partner at the time, I think I have a bit of a spending addiction. I see that I go and buy things to make myself feel better. Now, let me just clarify what I was buying. At the time, I was buying cheap, nasty clothing from a little store called Forever 21, where you could get an item of clothing for like $10. But I would buy a few of these pieces and get this thrill at my little goodies bag of these little pieces. So it wasn't like I was sending us into bankruptcy or anything like that. But I recognized that I did have this outside in sort of habit of when I buy something for myself, it fills me up. I could see that in myself. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. It's what we call in the three principles the outside in effect of something outside of myself will fill me up, will give me pleasure, or give me joy. So I saw that in myself and I copped to it and I owned it. And I said, this is going on. And my partner at the time was like, oh, well, I thought that too. And I'm glad that you've admitted this. And, I thought, oh, okay. But I was proud of myself for admitting it. Now, much later, I found out this person had multiple addictions that were
Oh.
completely being withheld from me. And
Hmm.
at the time, I thought, wow, what a perfect time that would have been to share some of those addictions with me when I was confessing to mine.
Right.
And there was that part that thought, wow, how interesting that even within the safety of me saying, um, I want to share this because I'm noticing this about myself and I don't know if this is healthy, what I'm doing here. Let me share it with you.
Hmm.
That you would have thought that the other person would have thought, wow, well, she's clearly being vulnerable and taking responsibility for something. This is an opportunity for me to do the same. And they didn't. And so what I'm saying is that's a classic case of one person growing and the other person not. And in the end, that the relationship wasn't a match anymore
Hmm.
because there was that disparity between personal growth within the relationship.
Oh yeah, I talked about, actually it's a chapter in my book. I talk about the rubber band experience of relationship, where there is that tension that gets put on it by one person growing, one person not. And so you explain it beautifully. Is that's the thing happens is that people sometimes do outgrow their relationships, and they stay almost out of loyalty or out of some sense of duty versus saying, I need to honor myself and move on. And part of that responsibility is sometimes saying, I'm taking responsibility for my life, which means I too do choose to leave that relationship.
Yeah. And
Big, big change.
tying that back to what we talked about last week again, which is that just because you choose to leave a relationship doesn't mean that you choose to end the loving that was there. You, I,
Right.
know- I know people that have left, like their relationships and remain best friends with their
Mm.
former partner. They love them dearly. They just know. Sometimes they use the words "I'm not in love with them anymore," which I find sort of interesting. The in love versus
Loving, yeah.
but the point is that just because they didn't want to stay in the relationship didn't mean that they had to end the loving. The loving remained. It took on a different form. That's the other thing. I used to work with Debbie Ford a lot, and she, in her spiritual divorce training, which I did with her, was she would say divorce is not the end of a relationship. Divorce is a change in the relationship.
Yes.
So you can actually still maintain the love that you had for that person that you were married to for many years, leave that relationship, and it just changes form, but it's
Hmm.
still
Absolutely. That's a for some people that's a paradigm shift to actually hear that, because there are a lot of people who think that when a relationship's over, that means the loving's over too,
there.
which
Hmm.
is unfortunately kind of an old-fashioned way of looking at things, because we used to think the relationship contained the love. So the relationship was gone, there's no love anymore because it was only in that relationship. So what you're saying is so powerful, because it does mean that when we transcend or move beyond or leave a relationship, we don't necessarily give up the love because it's ended.
Hmm.
That's a big wake-up call for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get back to our subject today. Taking
Indeed.
and again that's again it's not just that taking responsibility, as I said, for having maybe done something wrong in the past or having contributed in a negative way, but what you touched on in the beginning, which is really taking responsibility for ourselves and not, I often use this heart here. I use this heart and I say it's like what we do is when we fall in love with somebody else, we say, here's my heart, take care of it. And then we stand over them and going, hang on a minute, you're not taking care of it as much as, as well as I
Yeah.
take care of it. Well, maybe it's your responsibility to take care of your own heart. Doesn't mean that
Indeed.
it's not open and loving, but when we hand it blindly over to other people and make it their responsibility, and then we judge them because they're not, as I say, doing it a good a job as we would do, it's like, well, maybe it's because it's not their job. Maybe it really is your job to be responsible for your own heart.
Well, that's the thing. Being responsible. I mean, there's an old quote I remember from seminars years ago. Like, responsibility is the ability to respond.
Mm,
And so, and playing with wordplay, but the understanding is that when you have responsibility for your own happiness in the relationship, first of all, you take the pressure off your partner to satisfy you all the time with that level of happiness, whatever that is. But it also means that you play a bit better quality partnership with your partner because you've said to them, I take responsibility for who I am. And if your partner meets you on that level and does the same thing for themselves, the relationship can grow in levels it's never done before because the both of you are so clearly honoring yourselves. So you can then easily honor each other. And it's done from a place that is, going back to last week, unconditional in that sense, but also it's a level that's additive, that's valuable, that's giving each other the chance to grow and thrive without being constrained by some rule book that we've carried about. Well, responsibility means you've got to carry this load, this burden. It's like, no, being
mhm,
responsible for ourselves. Like, yeah, as I said at the beginning about, healthcare, it's like when we take care of ourselves, when it's health or money or whatever it is, we become a better partner to our partner. So
mhm.
it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm just trying to think. You've got me thinking here.
Ooh, I have.
Yes, thank you, Barry. You've got me thinking. No, it's so. I think it's such an interesting concept of how we are in relationship with each other.
Of course, yes.
Like people will look at me sometimes and think that I'm sort of like super independent because I choose to live alone and
Mhm.
enjoy living alone, even though I've been with my partner for 14 years now and we love each other dearly. But there is that independence that we have within the relationship. And I mean,
Yes,
I need him for little things and he needs me for little things. And we're constantly, but we don't make each other responsible for the big things like
right.
our happiness, like our livelihood, like our anything really. I mean, it's a beautiful give and take relationship. But I remember when he first met me, he said that he had met a few people that wanted to move so fast. They so quickly wanted to move in with him or get married or something like that. And I think he found me a breath of fresh air because I was like, no, my responsibility is me and my children. I've come out of a, really painful end of a marriage. And I said, it's like, I can't be, I need to take care of myself. I need to know that I can rely on myself, not on another person at this point, especially when you've had the rug pulled out from under you. It's very important to take that time to really, really build the foundation within yourself and know that no matter what happens in your life, you're going to be okay, that you are responsible for your own life.
Absolutely. It's funny. I was listening. I think it was actually I was on the radio. I heard something yesterday or day before talking about how a lot of couples nowadays often have their own homes. They don't actually live together or have their
Mm,
own bedroom. So it's like there's a common bedroom that they have sex in, and they're their own bedrooms they sleep in. And so that used to be such a strange idea, going back to 20, 30, 40 years ago. But there's something in a lot of ways that's very mature about having your own space to be your self partner. Yes, some people I know have that need, like I need to have my person with me all the time, and that's another conversation again. But understanding that we have responsibility for our own fulfillment, happiness, joy, loving, compassion, caring, all the things we do for ourselves, that when we're with our partner, we can be in the overflow. And so they can, and when both that way, again, it elevates the quality of the relationship. So, yes, having that partnership that is not based upon the proximity to each other, but it's
mhm.
based upon your own individual growth that then adds to each other, is a much healthier way of being.
Wow. Yeah, I thought I was so different. Yeah,
I don't know
you
how many people discovers, but just it was just not that's something I heard about.
it's so funny. I think growing up, because I didn't have a father growing up, I remember doing this drawing when I was in God primary school, I um and I had drawn these like two mountain tops, and I said, "Well, my husband's going to live here, and I'm going to live here, and he's going to be allowed to leave his toothbrush at my house." I mean,
Mm,
talk about the writing on the wall at a very young age. That was
yeah,
my view of how you did relationships. But yeah, it's that the richness that you bring to a relationship when you are fully sort of doesn't mean you don't need each other and want each other. It's
right.
when I use the word need, but want each other. But when
Hmm.
you make the other person responsible for your happiness, there's a heaviness that you bring to that, and it
Oh,
doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. I'm thinking right now of some siblings I know where they make each other, well, one of them makes the other one very responsible for their feelings,
hmm.
and it's very challenging, it's heavy, It's heavy when somebody is constantly blaming you for how they feel, blaming you for where they are in their life. It's almost like it's repulsive. It's almost like you want to push that person away and create some space from them. It's a very clinging, um, sort of energy that's so negative when we do that with somebody else. And some people don't see it. They don't see that they're emotional vampires or draining other people because they're so needy, and not just needy, but as I say, blaming as well. Like,
Hmm.
finger pointing, like, I feel, my life is a mess because of you. I suffer because of you. And I mean, there are times when you're in a relationship where the relationship is so challenging and so difficult that it does feel like your suffering is caused by the other person's behavior. But as we've just said, there is always, well, mostly, I won't say always, because I do know that sometimes it is very difficult to leave a relationship for many reasons. Some people are financially or physically disabled, and they don't have the choices to leave. But that's when you need to grow that, especially if you are in a narcissistic relationship or something where somebody's behavior is very hurtful, that you do grow that, what I call that, the Teflon suit, where the stuff that is coming at you just slides off you. It has nothing to do with you. It's just the way they view the world, and they're in pain and they attack because they're in pain. But it doesn't mean you take it on. It doesn't mean that you let it affect you. It doesn't mean it's truth. It's none of those things. But mostly we do, like we said, we have domain over our own lives, and we can remove ourselves. We don't have to sit there and suffer and keep blaming the other person for the state of your life.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny what you said there is almost like the price of codependency when we sit in a place where we end up giving the other person full dominion over how we feel, which is the trap we fall into. So yeah, this is a cornerstone of that work, to really start taking ownership of your own space in life and your own self support, whether it is controlled because you can't move out, but at least you can take care of your own attitude, how you respond, how you live your life, how you take care of yourself, so you don't feel that your emotions are controlled by the other person as well. Because yes, there are certain requirements in a relationship that keep you in there for whatever reason it could be, whether it is one person's sick and you're taking care of the other person, take care of them. You still take care of yourself internally.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily have to leave and desert them and leave them to fend for themselves, or for you to fend for yourself. But it's something that's so vital about having dominion over how you feel and having responsibility for your own interactions. And it is a big work. And that's why we talked about this way back at the beginning of our show, first few episodes about that challenge with narcissistic behavior and those things with codependency too, is sometimes we get caught up in those paradigms without realizing we're giving away responsibility for ourselves. And when we do start taking honest appraisal, looking in the mirror and seeing ourselves, okay, I can do this better, I can do this better, I can do this for myself as well. We start changing how we are in any relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a vital piece of it.
Yeah, no, as you were talking, I was, reflecting back on when I did feel, when I didn't know everything I know now, and that I was definitely felt like I was stuck and the victim of a narcissist's behavior. Now I see that it was a choice that I stayed there. I could have left. I could have done a million things.
Mhm.
Um, I could have not taken it personally. I could have seen it for what it was, but instead I was taking it personally, and I was physically completely depleted on a physical level because I was absorbing so much of the negativity and feeling so stuck and so helpless and so victimized and all of those feelings. And I mean, it's such a, well, thank God I'm not in that situation anymore. And thank God I'm in a wonderful, loving relationship.
Yeah.
But as I say, I look back and I think, God, that door was never locked. I could have always just walked through it, and I didn't, for many reasons. I don't beat myself up. I mean, I think psychologically back then I was doing the best I could. And if I could have done better, I would have done better. But I had my own demons to deal with. I had serious codependency issues and serious, fears and all the other things that come in that stop you from leaving an abusive situation.
Oh yeah, and definitely something I look back as well and see and I'm gonna say it this way: the lies we tell ourselves sometimes can be so disabling because we just didn't look to see the door was already open. That metaphor is beautiful to say that, because that's the thing, is we never sometimes look around clearly, and which never, but we often don't look around clearly and see that the way out is right there, and we just haven't looked for it before.
Yeah.
By
Oh, we
doing
look,
so, we
yeah.
friction.
I mean, the door might not even, sometimes it's not even that it's unlocked. Sometimes it's wide open and you still don't see there's a door. It's like, no, I'm looking in the other direction. I don't want to see that open door. I don't want to make that choice, which was very much me. Definitely. I look back and there were so many instances where, if I had not been in denial, I would have gone, hang on a minute, hang on a minute. This is not right. But I didn't. I was as dysfunctional in my own way. So, but it's like, again, back to that, taking responsibility. It's when we do that, we step out of the victim mode. We step into that place of sovereignty over our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so empowering. It really is. And again, as we said, it improves all our relationships when we take responsibility for ourselves. It brings us right back to being in the present moment and future focused when we can look back and say, like, just like I did right then, just say, hey, I take responsibility for that relationship. I was dysfunctional. I was
Right.
codependent. I was in denial. I was all of those things, and not to attack myself or put myself down, but they free me. They free me to go, I can choose differently next time. Now, if I stayed in the victim's seat of being just blaming, I'd be making the same choices. I'd be in the
Right.
same relationships. But clearly,
Absolutely.
when you take responsibility, you can move on from that.
And the thing about the responsibility, there's different levels of it. One, I mean, just to be aware of it, there's I know one reference point about 3 different levels. One of which is that we are sometimes in a situation where we actually create the situation we're in. We don't own the fact that we created it in the first place. So if we start going, "Hang on a second, I made that choice. I can change that choice," and you can step out of it. But then what happens also is sometimes we're in a place where we actually sort of invite it in. We sort of don't actually go and we make it happen, but we sort of set it up where it's going to come into life because we sort of invite it without realizing it. And so being aware enough to notice, hang on a second, I'm making that available to happen too. I can fix that and change that and make a different choice. But the third level, which is the most subtle level, is sometimes we get to scenarios where sort of we get blindsided by something. We're just like, how did that happen? But we look back and realize, oh, I wandered into that situation without even realizing it. So it's almost like a helplessness. But again, we can change how we feel and we can change where we are. So we can take ourselves out of situations like that that could be impactful upon us negatively. If you understand the level of how this happens, when we start taking responsibility for every way we interact in the world, to be conscious enough to notice those things, we're like, oh, I did that again. Like, like if you go park in the same parking lot and you always get dinged because and it's like you had it happen twice and you still do it. Change where you park. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, simple you can do. So being responsible that way does require presence of mind and awareness to start with. When you do, you can change your life.
Yeah, well, you just hit the key word there, which is awareness, and it's that you're talking about us finding ourselves in situations, and often without that awareness, without that reflection, and again, it's not to work on ourselves in the sense of we need to improve ourselves, but
Right.
it's more about just knowing ourselves, going home to who we really are, and seeing and understanding ourselves, and saying, oh, there's a pattern playing out here that I wasn't aware of. But
Right.
because I have that self awareness now, of course it's happening for a reason. Of course
Hmm.
it's coming into my life because number one, it's there to teach. There's something to learn. That's why I keep bringing it in, bringing it
Yeah.
in. But again, that responsibility of I am bringing this in for a reason. What is the reason? What is the lesson here? What am I supposed to see differently? So, well, I think we've knocked that one on the head.
It's a. I think we dropped a lot of seeds in this one, so it's good for people to consider
Yeah.
what we said. You watch this one again because there's definitely some thoughts you may have thought about that you skipped over as we went through this book. So if you heard things in this conversation, make notes on what we said because some of these things may change your life.
Hmm. Yes. Yes. Well, we've both certainly changed and our lives.
Yes,
So, yeah, anybody can. Okay.
indeed.
Well, thank you again. Thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful week. And we'll see you all next week.
Take care of yourselves. We'll see you again.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.